Yeah, every Sunday. So recording in progress. Yeah. So anyway, I thought that maybe today we can start with a guided meditation. Since you have started The Way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva, so as a way to anchor, this study, it's good to have some practice to go with it. I think despite, us saying and reminding that these teachings are not just good to think with and to think about, but that there's a practice component, a on cushion practice component to the things that we study. Many of the texts that are available now are available because translators have worked very hard to get them translated. So the root text, what they call, and then the commentarial material, then of course also the teachers teaching this, and so modern compilations of teachings that have been given by modern teachers. So there's all of that going on. So that's translated. What is not translated is the practice context in which most of these texts, or all of these texts, came out of. Whether it's ancient commentaries or present day commentaries, they were given first and foremost to practice communities. And so this practice community element is often missing within our context. So then we sometimes make the mistake of thinking, if I listen enough to what is said here, think enough of what is said here, think deeply enough of what is said here, that this is how it works. It may work, it may have some effectiveness, but it's not the program. It's not the designed program. The designed program, whether we like it or not, whether we're able to replicate or not, at least we have to be aware of the designed program whereby these texts circulate, whereby these texts are studied, whereby these texts are transmitted. So often missing is, what is the context? The context is practice communities. And until recently, these practice communities are communities of people who have made, or the decision has been made for them, or they made the decision to basically step away from what everybody else is doing, for all intents and purposes, right? What the other 99% are doing, this 1 or 2% have said, we are stepping away from that. So that's, of course, not, our reality, but it doesn't mean that we can ignore that context. I've given in the past, I think, examples of how this incomplete translation, you could call it that, is taking place. For example, some of the teachings that you find, like edited volumes of teachings given by, say, this very well-known Thai forest monk, Ajahn Chah, and further back, a set of collected teachings, transcripts of teachings that then were edited and sold many copies. I'm sure at some point, some of you probably read it. Shunryu Suzuki Roshi's Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. So it's easy to pick up a volume like Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. It's easy to pick up a volume like there's a volume published a while back called A Still Forest Pond, which is one of Ajahn Chah's Western disciples producing this kind of a series of very evocative quotes, extended quotes from Ajahn Chah. So that's translated, yes, that part is translated, but the context of these teachings often not translated, as in the practice community in which these teachings were given. In Ajahn Chah's context, these teachings were given to, first and foremost, the monks that have, stepped out of life as we know it, and committed themselves to, I guess, for lack of better expression, full-time engagement with the teachings. So they are doing practices, group and individual, throughout the day, whether on cushion or off cushion. Their whole lives and their whole identity revolves around that. And it is within that context, Ajahn Chah is saying things like, relax the mind, don't let it be so tight. Don't be distracted so easily, so on and so forth. And Shunryu Suzuki Roshi's Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, again, there was a context, and the context was the practice community. And in this case, it was in San Francisco, but it was nonetheless a practice community that spent many hours, doing formal meditation with him. And within that context, he's giving those instructions. Likewise, the way of the Bodhisattva, Shantideva gave it to his practice community. Monks that were part of Nalanda University. And in that picture, they were intellectuals. He was speaking to monks who were trained in the intellectual tradition of India, probably well steeped, or at least receiving training in both Indian Buddhist and non-Buddhist philosophies. So that's one of the contexts of this book. But another context, maybe a more important context, again, these were people who also had a discipline of not only studying, but also doing formal practice on a regular, daily basis, and spending hours doing that. So then when the text was translated, and now we have it in English, what we tend to do is just read, and then think. and think, and spend, I don't know, an hour, 2 hours a week thinking about this, and thinking that thinking about this is good and is enough. Then we think ourselves, into corners. We think ourselves into places that may or may not correspond with the intention of Shantideva. The intention of Shantideva when he gave, these instructions. So for us, I think, even if it is short, even if it is not that much, it is good, to do a little bit of formal practice as a community, to root, our studies of this text. Otherwise, we're just thinking about it. And if you can think yourself out of confusion, then most of us would not be confused anymore at this point. This is our burden, We think, we think that we can think ourselves out of confusion. And we even misapply the Dharma, just thinking deep thoughts, So Saturday Night Live, that parody, may run deeper than we actually recognize, Once upon a time, Saturday Night Live's, deep thoughts, So anyway, so today let us begin with a short meditation anchored on the Buddha of wisdom, which is Manjushri. So the Buddha of wisdom, Manjushri. In the general Mahayana tradition, Manjushri is recognized as a 10th Bhumi Bodhisattva. So a Mahasattva, sometimes called a Mahasattva, great Bodhisattva, on the verge of attaining complete and perfect Buddhahood, and therefore also one of the great disciples of the Buddha. So in the general Mahayana tradition, Manjushri is called great Bodhisattva, a Mahasattva. Then in the more specific context of Vajrayana, which Vajrayana, by the way, is part of Mahayana. Mahayana has two sides to it. One side is called the Paramita Yana, and one side is called the Vajrayana. Paramita is referring to the perfections. So the vehicle of the perfections and the vehicle of Vajra, or sometimes called the vehicle of secret mantra. The secret mantra vehicle and the paramita, or the perfections vehicle. And the paramitas is the stated meaning, the stated content of the Bodhisattva. The paramitas, the perfections. And more specifically, the 6 paramitas, the 6 perfections, the content of Bodhisattva practice. Secret mantra of Vajrayana is an aspect of the Mahayana, whereby in the context of Vajrayana, Manjushri is understood as a complete and perfect Buddha. And in fact, then Manjushri is a quality of this Buddha state. Likewise, Avalokiteshvara or Chenrezig or Kuan Yin, in the general Mahayana context, is considered a great Bodhisattva, a specific person, in fact. But from the Vajrayana perspective, Avalokiteshvara is no longer a specific person, but Avalokiteshvara is an aspect of the Buddha state, which is the aspect of compassion. And then Manjushri, in the context of Vajrayana, is a perfect Buddha, and specifically embodying the wisdom of Buddhas. Wisdom here, sometimes that word carries a lot of weight, but also is a little imprecise. So wisdom here is insight, clear seeing, perfect insight, perfect knowledge into what? Into the nature of phenomena, the nature of mind. which is the topic of chapter 9. The explicit topic of chapter 9 is this wisdom. And Manjushri is the embodiment of this wisdom. In the Mahayana context, the great bodhisattvas such as Avalokiteshvara and Manjushri are models of behavior, that we look to them as models, as guide. And in the Mahayana context too, we invoke them and quote-unquote pray to them and say, please help me, please guide me, please help me to advance along the path. But in the secret mantra of Vajrayana context, the way we relate to Avalokiteshvara and Manjushri and such Buddha figures is no longer limited to asking them to help us, to guide us. But we actively embody the qualities that these Buddhas represent, that these Buddhas manifest. So this is what is called deity yoga. This is called deity yoga. Deity in the secret mantra context is not talking about like the gods of the various realms of existence known as the Deva Loka or the God realms. Those types of deities are said to be deities still part of confused existence. Obviously, we don't model ourselves after those deities, but instead, or we don't strive to achieve, right, the level of those deities. Instead, we strive to achieve the level of the supreme deities, or sometimes called the supramundane deities, the world transcending deities, the ultimate deities. The ultimate deity then is the Buddhas, the state of Buddhahood. So Manjushri then in this context, we should relate to Manjushri as the very set of qualities, the very set of Buddha qualities that we are training to embody, to manifest, to actualize. Then the specific method is called sadhana. And sadhana, in a more technical sense of that word, is the means of accomplishment. So often referring to specific texts, specific visualizations composed by masters of the past and then passed down to us now. Then we rely on those basically meditation-ritual manuals. That's what sadhanas are, meditation or ritual meditation manuals, manuals for ritual meditation to help us embody and actualize the specific Buddhas associated with these sadhanas. But the broader meaning of sadhana, and some Hindus use this broader meaning that I think is relevant to us too. They will say, our whole lives need to be a sadhana. That our whole lives need to be the method of accomplishing. In other words, we should orientate our whole lives so that it becomes a sadhana. And there is also a connotation of devotion and discipline. To effectively practice the sadhana, accomplish the sadhana, requires both devotion and discipline. Devotion is the vastness aspect of the training, and discipline is the depth aspect, the profound and the vast, to be developed simultaneously. So, although the first reference point of sadhana is a particular manual for ritual meditation, in other words, meditation that incorporates ritual. And what is ritual? Ritual is a heightened way of doing something. You eat, I eat. We all need to eat. The act of eating is not ritual. But the act of eating in a particular way, that then becomes ritual. Ritual in the broader sense. That ritual is not just functional. Ritual is not just to get something done, but to also be a means of communication. Here, who are we communicating with? We're communicating with, in other words, we're having our confused selves communicate with our true self, our Buddha self, so to say. Yeah, so see ritual in that way. Use ritual in that way. Because the mind is a very powerful thing and very mysterious. I think we underestimate how mysterious it is. At best, we only have, many of us, I have a piece of paper to prove it, the degree I got from UVA, rolled up somewhere, I don't know where now, to prove it, that I have spent many years thinking, reading about other people's thoughts as well. Then we think, that is mind. Oh no, that is the easiest part of the mind to manage. If you do it well, if you have the resources, that's the easiest part of the mind to manage. But the really harder parts of the mind, the heart mind to manage, cannot really be effectively managed through that kind of knowledge, that kind of study. So these skillful methods, skillful means, these disciplines, these sadhanas help us to plumb into the more mysterious parts of the mind, for lack of better expression, the more mysterious part, the more subtle parts. And so the more limited sense of sadhana refers to this text, a specific ritual manual, meditation manual. But the broader sense of sadhana is that our lives need to be lived as a sadhana. Our lives need to be lived as a sadhana. And to live this life of sadhana, we need devotion and we need discipline. This pair of devotion and discipline is relative and ultimate bodhicitta in other contexts. Is love and compassion on the one hand, wisdom on the other hand. And yet in another context is the accumulation of merit on the one hand, and the accumulation of wisdom on the other hand. Yet in another context, it is the stability of the mind and the sharpness of the mind. So this pair you can track across different contexts, but we're basically developing the same qualities. And so anyway, to engage in sadhana, basically the structure of a sadhana is to begin with first letting go of our current preoccupations, our current thoughts, our current identity, our current fixations, to at least temporarily say to ourselves, for now, I'm going to lay aside all of this. So it begins with first adopting a particular physical posture, perhaps going to a particular spot in your house or outside of your house, where you have designated to be the place where you get on the cushion, so to say. So that is the isolation of the body. In other words, temporarily isolating your body from physical distractions. So the instructions say, place your body, let your body be in a position where it is settled, where it is at ease. And then there is the isolation of sound and speech. So find a place where there's not a lot of sonic stimulation going on, but also yourself making a determination not to engage in speech temporarily. And then the third is the isolation of the mind. So the mind pulling itself away from constant distractions. And in typical sadhanas, this is when we begin with what they call the meditation on emptiness. So some sadhanas will have a mantra of emptiness, such as Om Swabhava Shuddha Sarvadama Swabhava Shuddho Hang. That's one common emptiness mantra. Another common emptiness mantra is Om Vajra Swabhava Atmako Hang. So different sadhana texts, different meditation ritual texts, ritual manual will have different mantras, and sometimes not even a mantra. Sometimes it just says in words that from within emptiness, or all phenomena dissolve into emptiness. And that is a way to isolate the mind, to let the mind just come to rest. So we'll do a few moments of that. And perhaps we can do it by yourself wherever you are, whether you're joining us through Zoom or at the EBS temple. You can use instead of a mantra of emptiness, you can also use the syllable that is most often used to represent, to embody this emptiness. It's the syllable ah. The syllable ah. So when you're ready, you can just utter ah. And as you utter the sound, the syllable ah, you say to your mind, now settle, now temporarily, don't follow your thoughts, but just ah. To help your mind settle more easily, it might be beneficial to now give your mind a reason to not wonder. And the reason to not wonder, the best reason, is to bring up a memory of an experience of joy, an experience of joy, satisfaction, or happiness. And so this memory of a joy or happiness or satisfaction is, of course, often linked with some incident, some occasion. So if you need to, you bring the occasion up, but then fairly quickly you should leave behind that occasion, that circumstance, that story. Because what you want to do with that story, with that memory, is to evoke the sense of joy, joyful mind, happy mind, satisfied mind, and then let the mind feast on, let the mind kind of savor this memory. And through memory, then joy arises in the present moment. And that's how memory works. Memory then evokes, bring forward the experience that now becomes the present experience. If necessary, from time to time, you can either verbalize the ah sound or mentally bring up the ah sound to help settle both body and mind. And that ah is the first sound in the Sanskrit syllabary. And it is said that all other sounds have this basic sound of ah, right? In every single sound that whether humans or non-humans can make, this basic sound of ah is always there. And so then that is the reason why ah, the syllable ah, becomes the symbol of the emptiness that the Buddha taught. So emptiness and form do not cancel each other out. Emptiness is what allows form to manifest. And that that emptiness, is our nature, is also the nature of all phenomena. The nature of both animate and inanimate phenomena is all this emptiness, this ah. Because of this because of this emptiness nature, then it is possible for form to arise, to manifest. So out of this out of this emptiness nature, imagine 1,000-petaled lotus, big enough for a human person to sit on. 1,000-petaled lotus appears. Although the roots of this lotus grows in the muddy pond, without the muddy pond, this lotus doesn't bloom. And as this lotus blooms, it is not contaminated, it is not touched by the mud. And on this lotus, that exists, that has appeared now because of the nature of of emptiness, arises Manjushri in the youthful body with clear golden complexion. Manjushri appears in the youthful form, expressing the fresh nature of the mind, of wisdom, which is what the youthfulness symbolizes. And princely, youthful and princely. And princely represents the infinite qualities, good qualities, desirable qualities that can benefit beings. It's why Manjushri is dressed as a prince. Youthful by nature, princely by demeanor. In Manjushri's right hand, he grasps the sword of wisdom, holding aloft above his head the sword, while his left hand, with the thumb and the forefinger joined together, holding a stalk of lotus, the lotus that blooms above his left shoulder. And on this lotus that is blooming above his left shoulder, which comes from the stalk, the lotus stalk that he holds with his ring and forefinger held in front of his heart center. On top of this lotus is a volume containing the perfection of wisdom. In this case, you can also think it's Shantideva's way of the Bodhisattva and the Bodhisattva resting as a volume of text on this lotus. Appearing vividly, but without fleshy substance, without material substance, appearing, in other words, like a hologram. So just let your mind rest in this image of the embodiment of clear insight, the embodiment of the clear and stainless mind, the Buddha Manjushri. And from time to time you think, this is who I am. Like I am Manjushri, the ever youthful prince. Remembering what youthfulness means and what prince actually means. Let your mind rest on this physical form of Manjushri, golden colored in complexion, ever youthful and princely, holding a sword, and as well as a lotus with a text, seated comfortably at ease with confidence, certainty, and unmoving. Okay, that's just a very brief way to begin, some kind of sadhana practice, rather than giving you a text and then you say, oh, I chant this, I recite that. This is like the basic form of a sadhana. And then these more formal sadhanas, have a lot of details to them. Each of them is a different, you can think of them as a different fineness of sandpaper. Think of it as woodwork, like different coarseness of or fineness of the sandpaper is to be applied at different stages of this woodwork to bring the wood grain to make them obvious, to display the beauty. So we have to polish the diamond that is our mind, you know. So there are many other details that can be found in the individual, specific individual sadhanas. So any questions, any comments, or, you know?
Well, should we get images of Manjushri? And
If it's
no?
helpful, you know.
I mean, we could find one and share it with people so they have it.
Yeah, sure.
What I'm remembering, I went to Wu Tai Shan,
Mm-hmm.
and what I'm remembering about Manjusri is something about like
Yeah. So anyway, quick pause. Wu Tai Shan is this mountain, sacred mountain in north eastern China, that throughout the Buddhist traditions of East Asia and North Asia is where Tibet, Bhutan, you know, and they all kind of identify this mountain as the sacred mandala of Manjushri. Yeah. So anyway, go ahead, Karen.
Well, what I was thinking is something about like education or intellect or intelligence or something with Manjusri.
Yes, hence we say wisdom.
So you're just saying, okay,
Yeah, insight, all of that.
okay.
The wisdom of the Buddhas that dispel all confusions is the most important. Wisdom, intelligence, intellect, study. All the studying, all the intellectualizing, if all they do is produce more confusion, more thoughts, then that's not Manjushri, that's something else. Then thoughts, theories, philosophizing that can be effective in dispelling the kleshas. That's the sword of Manjushri. That is Manjushri.
I remember hearing about a particular method of meditation where when some thought arises in the mind, and you imagine cutting it down with a sword, right? Is that Manjushri's sword? Or?
Oh, you could. But
I was just
for some of us, that makes us more nervous, you know?
yeah.
That's probably a good image for people who are not already, you know, on a regular basis experiencing this and that type of anxiety. For sure, there are instructions like that, you know. Strike down, you know, slay every stray thought that turns up. But I think for us, that might just trigger a whole bunch of problems.
You know, I had it was very interesting to hear you talk about mantra and syllable, and I haven't really heard it that way. I mean, I've just, of course, it's come up in practices and so forth, but I really like this. I couldn't help but kind of also just think about the way that Westerners use and different ways, but connected in a way. You know, it's just recognition, delight, and relaxation. It just seems a common thread with the way that even we think of the syllable
Yes.
and kind of a universal thing going on there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like,
Yeah. Or it's like you realize something, you go, right. Ah,
Uh-huh.
I like it much.
Yeah, but the symbolism of the that I was talking about, primarily they will quote like the Manjushri Namasangiti, which is a very important Manjushri text. It's like a concert or a litany of the names of Manjushri. There's one text called Manjushri Namasangiti, translated into Tibetan, and I actually enjoy chanting that text. So the Manjushri Namasangiti in there, there is a statement that's often quoted. It says, is the primordial sound. But in the Indian context, instantly people understand what that means because it is part of like Sanskrit and also in Tibetan. Like in Tibetan, when you write a consonant, yeah, and Tibetan syllabary, syllabary is based on Sanskrit. Even though grammatically it's closer to the Mongoloid, Sino-Mongoloid language, but its written language is based on Sanskrit syllabary. So it shares the same characteristics with Sanskrit, which is consonants, when they are written, unless you use other markings, right? Then the syllable and the vowel that comes with the consonant is a sound. So the consonants would be the k sound, okay? The first one. So it's ka, ga, nga in the Tibetan. Those are the syllables. Unless there's a modifier to change the vowel, then the kind of the basic vowel is ah. And so that's why ah is called the primordial sound. As in, without modifying, then ah is the basic sound. Right? Then you could modify it with u, i, e, o. U, i, e, o are secondary to ah. So ah, yeah, is always present. So ka does not, so to say, destroy ah. Right? Does not destroy ah. Ah is always there. Right? Even in the sound ku or ki, or ke or ko. Ka, ku, ki, ke, ko, right? Ah is always there. So it becomes a potent symbol of the natural state or emptiness. So Shantideva's Bodhisattva, there are 10 chapters here. Yeah? If you go look at the table of contents, and the 10 chapters are
There's some in the cabinet over there.
the excellence of bodhicitta,
Mhm.
fashion, taking hold of bodhicitta, carefulness, vigilant introspection, patience, diligence, meditative concentration, wisdom, and dedication. Yeah, at least the translation that I have, the Padmakara translation, translate the chapters in this way. So if you look at it at a glance, maybe you recognize that immediately. Maybe what you recognize is chapter 6, 7, 8, 9. The titles of those chapters corresponds directly with the last 4 of the 6 paramitas. The 6 paramitas being the content of what bodhisattvas practice and attain and bring to perfection, which is the perfection of patience, the perfection of diligence, the perfection of meditative concentration, and the perfection of wisdom. In the commentarial tradition, they say that chapter 4 and 5, called carefulness and vigilant introspection, they are the mental qualities that are necessary for disciplined conduct, which is the second of the 6 paramitas. Then the first of the 6 paramitas is giving. Yeah. And the giving in this context, in the context of this text, is in chapter 2 and 3. Why? In chapter 2, you give up. It's a kind of an interesting way of giving, which is you give up the causes of suffering, which is what confession is. And to take hold of bodhicitta, there is actually a ritual. The ritual of taking the vow is what's described in chapter 3. And the words associated with the ceremony, in other words. And for that ceremony, you are to make offerings of all kinds to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas who will give you this bodhicitta. So in that way, the 6 paramitas are all in this text. Even though 2 and 3 don't have the word explicitly, dana or giving or generosity paramita, and 4 and 5 doesn't have shila, which is disciplined conduct, sometimes translated as morality. But it's not just morality, it's also a way of guarding the mind. And so here Shantideva emphasizes the qualities of carefulness and vigilant introspection. And the difference there, if we want to briefly talk about that, is carefulness is like attentiveness, and vigilant introspection is the ability to reflect. Attentiveness prevents suffering from arising. But if attentiveness is not strong, sometimes that happens, surprise, surprise, then even if, the causes of suffering has arisen, it's not yet lost completely, because with vigilant introspection, you can still reroute that. But both these mental qualities are necessary in order for disciplined conduct to be perfected, to be established, and to be perfected. Then the excellence of bodhicitta, the chapter 1, lays out the main topic, the main organizing principle of this whole text is the actualization of bodhicitta. Then chapter 10 is dedication. And so the excellence of bodhicitta begins with that chapter. The qualities of bodhicitta, why bodhicitta is so amazing, and therefore we should give rise to bodhicitta, we should generate bodhicitta, and then the rest of the chapters is how does this bodhicitta play out, so to say? What are various aspects of this bodhicitta? They are the 6 paramitas. Another way of thinking about it is chapter 1 to 3 is aspiration pertains to aspiration bodhicitta, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pertains to action bodhicitta. Aspirational bodhicitta and action bodhicitta. So that's kind of a general overall structure of this text.
Can I ask you a question about the context that you referred to before? People in Theravadan countries, Southeast Asia, do they study this stuff too or not?
No, because this is Mahayana tradition, you know?
Okay.
Yes.
So, but in terms of like who comes to EBS, because we're sort of inviting people to come to this class.
Yes.
All of the Zen people
Yes.
would find it relevant. And
Yeah.
okay, that's one thing. And then the second thing is to the monks at Nalanda when he was talking to them, the paramitas would have been like bread and butter, right? They would have.
Yes.
They would
Yes.
have
They
stuck.
all would recognize that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
The legend with him was that he was invited to teach as possibly a way of kind of embarrassing him because he had this reputation. And he asked, well, what should I teach about? You want to hear something new or something old? And he said,
Yeah.
new. And
Correct.
so what is the newness part? If this is the paramitas and the basis and stuff was known to these experienced monks.
Wait, say that again. Sorry.
Well, he wasn't presenting, he was presenting known material freshly, is
Yes.
what I gather, in his own way.
Yes.
That was very powerful. That's
Yes.
the revolutionary part of what he was doing
Yes.
with. Okay.
Another question. I'm sorry, Dr. Lai, but
No.
we've been looking at the class you taught back in, I don't know, whenever it was 2020.
Uh-huh.
That all the videos are there.
Yes.
And then one of those you mentioned a daily practice of reading a couple of verses
Yes.
and contemplating them. Do you want to say anything more about that to us or?
I think, yeah, you could do that. And even like, I don't know, again, you know, you can be flexible, you can experiment, even not so much like contemplating, because again, you know, like we have this disease of thinking too much, right?
Yeah.
So I would even start by advocating just like almost like treating this almost like, you know, in the Christian Catholic tradition of the Psalms, you know, which is every day to recite, you know, a number of verses and then stop there. Yeah, whatever daily practice you already have, not instead of, but on top of that. So you read a few pages each day, until you reach the end, and then you start again. So just let it slide in a more osmosis kind of way, and don't think about it. Don't just let the words resound, resounding the words, in other words. And from cover to cover again, to start from cover to cover and to cover to cover.
Yeah, you had a really poetic way that you framed that on the YouTube teachings where you said, let it perfume your mind,
Mm-hmm.
which I really love.
Right? So just let it do that, without you kind of wang about it.
Oh, shucks.
We're so good at.
Well, I'm also curious about the joy.
Uh-huh.
Well, I just haven't heard that before.
Ah.
Yeah, and it's wonderful. Because usually we're like concerned with what's wrong with everything and why we have to fix it and blah, 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 and I really like that. But I mean, is that sort of intrinsic to this too, or? Yeah.
I think so. So when we talk about meditative concentration, which is a bad translation for samadhi, samadhi is like often translated as meditative concentration or concentration. Then when we think of concentration, we are often stuck in the fighting distractions to establish concentration, rather than giving body and mind a good reason to be united, to be collected, because rather than it's sort of like these days, sometimes, whether you agree with it or not, okay, I'm not going to get us into that argument, but right, a more kind of like or a trendy way of, they say, raising kids is don't tell a kid don't do this, because that's like basically saying you've introduced to them some curiosity about what happens if I do it, right? So rather than saying to your mind, don't do this, right? Say to the mind what to do. Yeah, so what to do is samadhi, rather than concentration, is really the word sama is same. And what about same? Same here is talking about, it has a connotation of the mind and is collected rather than fragmented and distracted. So what is the mind distracted by? The mind is not really distracted by anything bad per se. The mind in its own way, right? Our mind or our attention, so mind sometimes has this connotation of like something mysterious, something true, something, let's just say attention, right? Which is a verb, or I mean a noun, but emphasizing the verb part of the mind, right, rather than a thing. How does the mind behave? Well, the mind has points of attention. So when the mind loses attention, what do we mean by that? We mean, instead of body and mind being here, obviously body is here, mind is not here. Mind would rather go somewhere else. Now, why? Not because the mind is evil, not because the mind is bad, but simply the mind goes to what's most interesting to the mind. And at the peril of you, whatever you is. So now, give the mind something that it will like, which is the experience of joy, which is in Tibetan is gawa, or deva, which is happiness, or sometimes translated as bliss. It's the same word, deva. Dewa Chen, the blissful realm of Amitabha. Dewa, and then Gawa. Gawa is joy. Now, the Buddha says there are skillful ways to experience Deva and Gawa, and there are unskillful ways. So then we want to use the skillful ways. Then you say, well, what makes it skillful or not skillful? For those who are already identified as Buddhists, it's easy. Skillful is what the Buddha taught as skillful. Unskillful is what the Buddha taught as unskillful. Not to sound dogmatic, but it simply says, well, it's there, it says, Unskillful is, like I like eating chocolate or hamburger, so I'm going to go remember that. Well, Buddha says, if you use that as a way to spark this experience, it's going to be unskillful.
Mm.
But a joy that is skillful is a memory of a joy that is skillful is one that doesn't, as much as possible, doesn't also trigger the trap of sensuality. So this is actually related to the more basics of meditation, and it's also found to our Theravada friends, Dharma friends. It's found in the 16 steps of the Buddha's breath. Specifically, the first 8 steps. Of the first 8 steps, the first 4 steps is settling the body into ease. The next 4 step is to settle the mind. How does the mind settle? The mind settles into Deva and Gawa in Tibetan, happiness and joy, which in Pali or Tibet or Sanskrit is Sukha and Piti. Sukha is the opposite of Dukkha. Sukha and Dukkha. So then the difference between what we translate as happiness and joy, Sukha and Piti, or Deva and Gawa. In this context, Sukha is the kind of the more, there's more excitement there. Gawa or joy is the more stable. So initially it appears as Sukha, almost like to get the mind's attention, it's like Sukha. Then once the mind has come back and is happy to be back, then you develop Gawa, joy. Then when you give the mind that to feast on, it's more likely to stay here and not wander around.
I have one more if we can tolerate Cheryl talking too much. The idea when you were talking about Manjushri and you were talking about sadhana meaning a way of life rather than a thing you just do and you can get up and do your life. If he's a prince, then he's always a prince. There's no time when he is in the world not being a prince. It's like a full-time job, even more.
Yes.
And so for us, though, we can say, well, I'm going to be a Buddha now, and then I'm going to have breakfast and go be, a grandma, whatever. So I like that, what you're pointing to, that, no, it's a full-time, all the time.
Yeah, you don't not become a prince, despite Harry's decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't unprince, and like it's like it's DNA,
I saw this, this is still, but this, somebody was interviewing Obama. The guy from, Jerry Seinfeld was interviewing Obama, and he said, when Obama was president, and he said to him, so when do you get to walk around in your underwear?
Uh-huh.
You know, and he was like, I'm still a president in my underwear, can't, you know, there's no
Right.
time,
Right,
no,
right.
no. Oh,
And he has a beige suit too.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah. So
thank you.
yeah, so anyway, I'm going to leave you guys now.
Okay.
So if you can, like at every start of Sunday, take a few moments, it doesn't need to be the full Manjushri. And perhaps, like you say, if you have like at least those of you who are gathered, right, in at EBS, if you have a print of Manjushri, simply letting your mind rest on that image, right? Since I may or may not, be doing the guiding, right?
Yeah.
Just having everyone gaze on that image and identify with that image. That's a good way. And then eventually, if you want, yes, we can produce a sadhana, not like write one, but I can find one,
Mm.
then you can anchor your collective practice on. But as we all know, or at least those of us who have hung around Tibetan Buddhism long enough, like having a sadhana is both exciting and also troublesome.
Mm.
So I don't want to, kind of replicate that. Oh, like it almost, I feel like it distracts us from the real work of the sadhana, to be immediately given a text. It becomes mechanical very quickly, So now in a more kind of essential level of engaging in a sadhana, life as sadhana. And then later on, you can have text.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, Tata, and the goal is to meet with you guys next Sunday, and I don't think there's anything that would obstruct that, so hope to see all of you next Sunday.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lye.
Bye-bye. Hello,
Bye.
Steve. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Have a good Sunday.
That's great. That was so great.
He seemed to be in a good mood today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that, kind of separating the Mahayana and the Vajrayana approach to sadhana or to Manjushri and that would,